When Osiris fell, the land did not cry, it held its breath, because something greater than death had occurred. Order had been broken, not by battle, not by rebellion, but by betrayal. Seth did not ask. He seized. He did not claim the throne. He violated it. The seat of divine kingship was not a prize. It was a position earned by alignment, by balance, by truth, and now it was covered in shadow. Temples whispered, priests offered words but not answers, because the gods themselves had withdrawn, not in anger but in silence. The Nile hesitated, its flood no longer certain, its rhythm disturbed, because even rivers flow according to law, and the law had been wounded. Isis wandered, not as widow, but as memory keeper. She gathered what could not be seen. She remembered what must not be forgotten. Osiris had not vanished. He had descended into a place not of punishment, but of preparation, below the earth, beyond the stars. He waited not to return, but to continue. This was not resurrection, it was realignment, and within Isis, the throne began again, not with decree, but with conception. A seed of balance hidden in silence, conceived in mourning, shaped by law. The gods watched, but did not interfere, because the dynasty of the gods could not be rebuilt by force, only by example. And the example had to be born not from vengeance, but from alignment. So the throne remained, not empty but waiting, and in the black land where silence speaks louder than sound, a heartbeat began not of war, but of restoration. He was not born to be seen, he was born to be preserved. Before he had a name, he had a purpose, not to avenge, but to restore. Horus was not raised in temples. He was hidden, not in shame, but in strategy, because chaos watches and power hunts early. So Isis did not crown him. She protected him. She taught him not how to rule, but how to wait. In the marshes he learned silence. In the winds he learned listening. No throne was spoken of, only balance. He was a god, but he was also a child, and a child must be shaped, not just protected. But refined, his tears were sacred, his questions a form of worship, because those who seek truth must first face doubt. While Seth ruled in light, Horus grew in shadow, and the shadow was not absence, it was preparation. He watched birds fly in formation. He watched reeds bend without breaking. He watched water split and rejoin. All of it a language of law spoken without words. Isis said little, but when she did, it was never about victory. It was about alignment. You will not defeat him, she said. You will, reveal him. Because false rulers collapse from within, their weight undoes them. The gods did not rush, they waited. Because a dynasty is not reborn in haste. It is remembered through rhythm, and Horus was not a weapon. He was the rhythm returned. Seth wore the crown, but it did not fit. He held the staff, but it did not guide. He sat upon the throne, but it did not recognize him. Because power without alignment is not authority, it is weight, and weight crushes those who pretend. Seth ruled not through order, but through force. Temples remained open, but prayers were hollow. Festivals were held, but joy was absent. Fear filled the gaps where reverence once lived. The Nile flowed but irregularly. The stars turned but uncertainly, because the cosmos, though vast, responds to vibration, and the vibration of Seth was discord. He believed loyalty could be commanded, that silence meant submission, but silence is also resistance. The priests spoke praises with their mouths, but not with their hearts. The land obeyed out of necessity, not devotion. And in the stillness, a question formed, one Seth could not escape. What makes a king divine? He built monuments, but they did not echo. He decreed order, but it did not endure, because the divine does not shout. It aligns, and alignment cannot be demanded. It must be embodied. Seth looked into mirrors and saw threat, not reflection, because he knew what the throne had known all along. He was not chosen. He was not born of the law. He was not part of the rhythm. He had broken what he could not build. And every day the throne grew heavier, not because he was weak, but because he was alone. Divinity requires unity, and Seth stood apart. Before he could rise, he had to endure. Horus was not granted rule. He was given trials, because divinity is not inherited, it is refined, and refinement requires resistance. The gods did not hand him the crown. They watched as the world tested him, not with blades but with doubt. Could he remember law in the face of pain? Could he hold silence in the presence of provocation could he remain whole when hatred offered power. He was a child, but the throne did not wait. The marshes became his school and time his teacher. He fell, not once but many times, each fall a removal of arrogance, each wound a subtraction of ego, because a ruler is not the strongest but the most aligned. He met spirits in shadow, not to fight but to understand. He faced beasts not to destroy but to measure. He learned that fear was not an enemy but a message, that power was not possession but proportion. And above all, he learned to see imbalance in its earliest flicker, to see deception not in words but in rhythm. When he wept, the Nile stirred. When he listened, the wind aligned. Because balance recognizes itself, the gods were silent, not because they had abandoned him but because they trusted him. And trust is the final test. A child who would be king must become not a god of power but a god of patience. Horus passed, not by triumph but by truth, and truth was the only force that could touch the throne again. They called it a battle, but it was not fought for conquest. It was not a war of armies. It was a reckoning of order. Horus did not rise to destroy Seth. He rose to reveal him, because the throne cannot be taken. It must recognize its bearer. Seth stood with force. Horus stood with alignment. One shouted, the other listened, and the gods watched, not as generals, but as judges of balance. Every clash between them was more than muscle. It was principle versus excess. Horus was wounded, often. His eye torn, his body shaken, but pain was part of the proof. Because if the air could be broken, he was not worthy, and if he could not forgive, he was not balanced. Seth struck with fury, with chaos, with fear. Horus endured, not by matching wrath, but by outlasting it. In the realm of the gods, victory does not belong to the strongest. It belongs to the one who remains aligned. Each time Seth acted from ego, he unbalanced himself. Each time Horus acted from law, he grew heavier with legitimacy until the Atum scales could no longer be ignored. And in the hall of judgment, not by sword but by truth, the verdict emerged. Horus had not won, he had become. And Seth had not lost, he had revealed himself. The war was not a war, it was a weighing. And now the throne was ready. The throne was not a reward. It was a test that never ended. It did not honor blood, it honored balance. Not all who sat upon it were kings. Not all who wore the crown were rulers. Because the throne had memory, it remembered who honored Maat and who distorted her rhythm. Horus approached it not with triumph, but with reverence. He did not ascend, he aligned. And when he sat, the throne did not celebrate, it stabilized. Because balance does not cheer, it restores. The gods were silent, not in indifference, but in acknowledgement. Even Ra lowered his gaze, not in submission, but in recognition. A new cycle had begun, not by breaking the past, but by fulfilling it. Osiris was not avenged, he was completed, because justice in Egypt was not punishment, it was restoration. Seth was not cast into oblivion, he was removed from the center, because chaos is not destroyed, it is displaced. The throne now held not just a god, but a symbol, a being who had suffered, waited, understood, and returned. The people did not chant, they breathed, because in that moment, Egypt remembered itself, not as land, not as power, but as alignment. The stars reoriented, the Nile flowed steady, and for the first time in many years, the silence was full. The throne was balanced again. The eye was never just an organ, it was memory, it was witness, it was law in the form of light, torn from Horus not in weakness but in sacrifice. His eye had seen pain, seen betrayal, seen truth, and in its return, it did not see vengeance. It saw everything. The eye of Horus was restored, but not for him alone. It became a symbol for those who watched and those who remembered, because Egypt did not trust words. It trusted signs, and the eye was the sign that balance had eyes. Eyes that never slept, eyes that judged. Silently, not from anger, but from clarity. The priests wore it, the dead carried it, the kings invoked it, not to gain power, but to remind power that it was always being seen. The eye became law etched on tombs, painted on ships, carved in stone. Because in Egypt to be unseen was not safety, it was danger. The invisible law had made itself visible through vision itself, and vision required stillness, required honesty. To meet the eye of Horus was not to be watched, it was to be revealed. And revelation is the end of deception. This is why even after death the eye followed the soul, not to punish, but to weigh, because what is seen cannot be hidden again. And so from the throne to the grave, the eye watched, not as a threat, but as a mirror. The eye of Horus was not vengeance. It was alignment permanently awakened. In Egypt, a name was not sound, it was structure. To speak, a name was to summon presence. To erase a name was to erase being. This is why memory was sacred and forgetting was feared. When Osiris was torn, his name scattered, fragmented with his body, and as Horus rose, he did not just seek justice, he sought restoration, not revenge, but remembrance, because to heal the land, he had to heal the past. The name of Osiris had to return, not whispered but declared, not as victim but as foundation. So Horus spoke it in temples, in courts, in silence, and with each repetition the balance tightened, because in Egypt a name reborn is order reborn. The gods heard it and nodded, the people heard it and stood, the Nile heard it and flowed straighter, because a name is not just remembered, it is reinstalled into the rhythm of the world. Horus did not become king by claiming his own name, he became king by restoring another's. This is how legitimacy was proved, not through strength but through service, not by placing oneself above, but by raising what had fallen. The dynasty was never just blood, it was alignment, and alignment is shown by how one treats the forgotten. Osiris was no longer the dead god, he was now the eternal axis, his name restored by the sun, reclaimed by the people, respected by the gods. And from this moment, no name was just a name. Each carried weight, each echoed in judgment, each became a measure. The restoration of the name was the restoration of the world. In Egypt, a name was not sound, it was structure. To speak a name was to summon presence, to erase a name was to erase being. This is why memory was sacred and forgetting was feared. When Osiris was torn, his name scattered, fragmented with his body, and as Horus rose, he did not just seek justice, he sought restoration, not revenge but remembrance, because to heal the land, he had to heal the past. The name of Osiris had to return, not whispered but declared, not as victim but as foundation. So Horus spoke it in temples, in courts, in silence. And with each repetition, the balance tightened, because in Egypt a name reborn is order reborn. The gods heard it and nodded, the people heard it and stood, the Nile heard it and flowed straighter, because a name is not just remembered, it is reinstalled into the rhythm of the world. Horus did not become king by claiming his own name, he became king by restoring another's. This is how legitimacy was proved, not through strength but through service, not by placing oneself above but by raising what had fallen. The dynasty was never just blood, it was alignment, and alignment is shown by how one treats the forgotten. Osiris was no longer the dead god, he was now the eternal axis, his name restored by the sun, reclaimed by the people, respected by the gods. And from this moment, no name was just a name. Each carried weight, each echoed in judgment, each became a measure. The restoration of the name was the restoration of the world. Dynasty did not mean lineage, it meant alignment. Blood alone did not grant power, balance did. A son was not heir unless he embodied Ma'at, because the gods did not bless inheritance, they blessed structure. Egypt did not worship family, it worshipped continuity. This is why Horus was not honored for being son of Osiris. He was honored for restoring balance. He proved that blood means nothing if it serves only itself, and everything if it serves the law. The pharaohs who followed claimed descent from gods, but their real challenge was to descend into order, to embody what Horus did, not in name but in function. They took his crown, but also his burden. Each coronation was not just a ritual, it was a recalibration, a test, a measurement. And if one failed, the land responded. The Nile receded. The people murmured. The silence grew heavier, because the gods did not speak loudly. They corrected through nature. And when balance was restored, order returned, not because of birth, but because of worth. This is why Egypt endured for thousands of years. not through blood but through structure. A dynasty of gods that became men, and men who remembered they were never more than vessels, temporary holders of eternal balance, and the throne watched them all, impersonal, unmoved, precise. It did not ask who your father was. It asked whether you understood the weight you were about to carry, because in Egypt, the bloodline was not blood, it was balance. The gods did not rule by command. They ruled by presence, and when the world aligned, they spoke less, because silence was the language of balance. In the myths, the gods debated, fought, judged. But in Egypt's soul, they listened. Ra sailed the sky, not shouting orders but illuminating paths. Thoth recorded, he did not interfere. Ma'at did not strike, she weighed even Horus when victorious did. Not roar, he stood still, because stillness was the sign of power in alignment. The gods were not absent, they were restrained. They did not impose, they sustained. And this was their greatness, not dominance, but discipline, not authority, but precision. When humans shouted, the gods watched. When humans acted justly, the gods became quiet, not because they didn't care, but because nothing more needed to be said. Egypt understood this. Temples were built not to hear gods, but to host their presence. Offerings were not to persuade. They were to align. Rituals were not superstition, they were structure. And the gods responded not with miracles, but with continuity. When balance was broken, they did not scream. They receded. And in that absence, the people understood. Because silence is the loudest voice when the world listens. This is why Egyptian religion was not about salvation. It was about symmetry. To be near a god was not ecstasy. It was responsibility. To carry their symbol was to bear their silence. And the deeper one listened, the more one realized the gods were never far. They were simply immeasurable. And in Egypt, that was enough. Chaos was not an enemy. It was a necessity. Seth was not a villain. He was a force. Because in Egypt, chaos was not evil. It was imbalance uncontained, destruction without measure. But even chaos served a purpose. Without Seth, Horus had no trial. Osiris had no death. Ma'at had no meaning. Balance is not peace. It is tension held. The gods understood that to eliminate chaos was to destroy. Contrast. And without contrast, there is no structure. So chaos was not destroyed. It was ritualized, contained in myth, enacted in ceremony, acknowledged in silence. The festivals of beating Seth were not vengeance. They were reminders that chaos must be seen to remain outside. Hidden chaos becomes corruption. Named chaos becomes boundary. This is why the world never rested. The Nile flooded, the desert expanded, the stars shifted. Because balance is not stillness. It is movement within form. And chaos was always waiting at the edge, not as punishment but as test. Every pharaoh faced it. Every priest navigated it. Every builder calculated it. Chaos did not die. It rotated like night after day, like drought after flood, like silence after praise. Egypt endured not by denying chaos, but by understanding it returns, always. This is why the dynasty of the gods never closed its gates, because the throne must always be tested, the law must always be weighed, the gods must always be quiet, and chaos must always be at the door. A cycle not of names, but of principles. Alignment was the true bloodline and silence was the final voice.